Greetings. This is going to be a very quick introduction to the little-known subject of Lashawan Quadash diacritical marks. However, as a quick disclaimer, I hope it goes without saying that this video should not be taken as an endorsement of the system. Rather, I'm simply explaining it for others. There are certain proponents of Lashawan Quadash who will write in the Phoenician script and place curious marks under certain letters, resembling either a smile or a frown, depending on its location in the word, as you can see here. If you look closely at one of the oldest One West icons of Christ, you'll notice the same marks appearing there on the menorah which he was holding in his hand. By the way, on a side note, I have not seen anyone else point this out, but that's a curious spelling of the name, which is the name of Joshua. However, while it's not a biblical spelling, it's not completely a historical, as I have read that the medieval Italian Kabbalist Menachem Azaria da Fano apparently owned a Torah scroll with that spelling for the name Joshua. But anyway, let's get back to the subject of Lashawan Quadash diacritics. Here are some class notes from the original school in the early 90s, and you'll see the same marks appearing. Down at the bottom of the page, there's an explanation, and it states that the character that looks like a smile is to connect letters, and what looks like a frown is to separate them. To elucidate that, first recall that in Lashawan Quadash, if a character is vocalized, it only has one possible vocalization. And with the exception of the 16th character, the ayin, every character has an A-class vowel, an ah sound. So ah, ba, ga, da for aleph, bet, gimel, daled, etc. So when you see what looks like a frown, that signifies that the character takes its standard vocalization. However, when you see what looks like a smile between two characters, it signifies that the two characters are connected and the second one is unvocalized. So, for example, suppose we have a hypothetical word spelled with the Beit, Gimel, and Daled, the equivalents of B, G, and D. If the separator or the disconnector, what looks like a frown, appears under each letter, then the word is pronounced ba, ga, da. However, if the separator or disconnector, what looks like a frown, appears under the first character, while a connector, what looks like a smile, appears under the last two characters, then the word would be pronounced ba, gad, because the last character is unvocalized. And likewise, if the connector, or what looks like a smile, appears under the first two characters, while a separator or disconnector, what looks like a frown, appears under the last character, then the word would be pronounced bagda, bagda. In short, while the first and third characters are pronounced, the second character is unvocalized. To have a little fun with this, we can actually use these diacritics to signify the different pronunciations employed by two elders of GMS, those being Tahar and Ahrayamlab. Their different pronunciations of the word qadrū, which is the third-person plural verb that appears in Jeremiah 14:2. Now, as a disclaimer, their differing pronunciations are not intentional. I think if they were pressed on this, they would say that one of them had a slip of the tongue. Nonetheless, let's listen to the different pronunciations of Ahrayamlab and Tahar.
QuaDaRaW, QuaDaRaW, QuaDaRWa, QuaDaRWa is here, QuaDaRWa, QuaDaRWa.
So, because Tahar pronounces it QuaDaRaW, the way to signify his vocalization or pronunciation is to put the separator or disconnector, which looks like a frown, under each of the first two characters, and then to put the connector, which looks like a smile, under the last two characters, QuaDaRaW.
QuaDaRaW,
In the case of Ahrayamlab's pronunciation or vocalization, he said QuaDaRWa, so you put the separator or disconnector under the first character, then a connector, which looks like a smile, underneath the second and third characters, and then another separator or disconnector, which looks like the frown, under the last character to get QuaDaRWa.
QuaDaRWa.
The different pronunciations implies a lack of standardization, which can have interesting potential implications. For example, let's listen to Ahrayamlab describe how you say the phrase, my Lord, in Hebrew.
My Lord in the Hebrew is Adawanya. Adawan with an N, with an I at the end. Adawan, that's Lord. Adawanya makes it possessive, my Lord. So Adawanya.
So Ahrayamlab pronounces the word Adawanya. However, recall the way that Tahar pronounced the resh wa, the R and the W essentially. He pronounced it raw.
Raw.
Which then raises the question, why can't the dalet wa, the equivalent of D and W, be similarly pronounced daw? With that in mind, rather than Adawanya, where you have a disconnector under the first and the second characters each, then a connector for the third and fourth characters and another separator under the last character, what if instead you had a connector under the second and third character and another connector under the fourth and fifth character, and you pronounced it Audalnai? Now, admittedly, the system still doesn't permit one to distinguish between a plural noun and a singular noun, Adoni and Adonai, but nonetheless, Adalnai seems to be moving a little bit closer to actual Hebrew. I thought that was interesting. Now, before I close, it's worth noting that these diacritical marks are completely ahistorical, or put another way, they're a completely modern innovation. There's no evidence of the ancient Phoenician script, ancient Paleo-Hebrew, employing these diacritical marks. Rather, they were created by Ahrayah. And that's ironic because Ahrayah attacked the diacritical marks which appeared in the Masoretic text, the niqudot. And the reason it's ironic is because he essentially rejected diacritics that are more than 1,000 years old on the grounds that they're not ancient, and yet replaces them with completely modern diacritics. Nonetheless, there was a reason for introducing these modern diacritics, and it was part of an attempt to standardize Lashawan Quadash pronunciation. Take, for example, the word on the screen here. In Lashawan Quadash, is it pronounced shalom or shalama? Now, proponents of Lashawan Quadash today might think that the answer is obvious, that it's obviously shalom, but there are old-timers who remember Abba Bivens teaching instead that it was pronounced shalama.
Then I learned Derek Abbott. Derek Abbott is the one that Abba used to teach us.
Like Shalom, how they speak like that?
It was you know, instead of saying shalom, they say shalama.
Shalom.
They said barakata, you know, and you know it was.
So too with this word, which is the word for Israel, is it pronounced Yashar Allah or is it pronounced Yashar Al? Most proponents of Lashawan Quadash would say that Yashar Allah is standard, but you see more and more people saying Yashar Al. Although I have to give credit to Hashar, with a little bit of a tacit nod to Arabic, he's the first to slightly change the inflection. So rather than saying the standard one West, Yashar Allah, he says Yashar Allah, which I kind of like.
Hey, Yashar Allah! Yashar Allah!
In short, there was an open question as to when a character is vocalized and when it's left unvocalized. And so the connectors and disconnectors, or connectors and separators, were introduced by Ahrayah. Ahrayah introduced these new diacritics to the Phoenician script, to so-called Lashawan Quadash, in an attempt to standardize the pronunciation of his system. Now, of course, where exactly he added it is somewhat arbitrary, but that's nonetheless the history of Lashawan Quadash diacritics.